Hello, Amanda here, and today I'm going to show you how to design a coaster. We're going to be focusing on using angles and also understanding how to apply the pattern command. And don't judge me, it is February and get used to this. Yes, I still have my tree up in the background, so don't judge me too harshly. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is what is an angle. You probably won't get into a lot of angle application. You will, so okay. If you've gotten to the Pythagorean theorem, you've gotten to some angle application, but you won't really get into like the weeds of it unless you get into trigonometry. There is some vocabulary that you'll learn in geometry, but trig is really where I think the magic happens. So um, if you ever have the opportunity, trigonometry is a great class to take for design because you learn about so many useful shapes and the relations, and it's a great class. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is an angle, and in order to do that, I'm going to get into a sketch. So I'm going to left click on my sketch command at the top left on the screen. And by default, I always just like to start drawing on the top plane or the base plane here. Um, so I don't really care about my units or anything right now because so there actually is two different units that you can work with. Most people are familiar with degrees, but there are units of radians as well. You probably won't see radians unless you take trig. I don't think they teach radians in high school. I could be wrong. I mean, unless you take calculus, then you might get into a little bit of radians. But for the most part, you will see degrees. So I'm going to talk about how to dimension a angle and what an angle is for those that don't know. I'm going to explain it in two different ways. First, I'm just going to draw a triangle, and then I'm going to draw a angle by itself so that you can kind of see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a triangle here. So I just left click on my line command. Now I'm going to left click and let go. If you left click and hold on, you will activate the arc command. It has a shortcut. It's supposed to be helpful. It's frustrating to a lot of students, so just be careful. So left click and let go, left click and let go, left click and let go, and then go all the way until you get back to your starting point. You don't necessarily have to draw this, but I just wanted to show you kind of what an angle is. So a triangle, by tri, it means three, and it has angle in the actual name, which is cool. I think that's cool. Kind of a nerd, though. So I'm going to go ahead and press the escape key on my keyboard. I know there's a big black area over here. I'm not sure why it's like that. I also noticed that the drop-down menu doesn't appear. So like if I right-click on my screen, I see a drop-down menu, but you don't. I don't know why that disappears. I'll try not to use that too much and just use my keyboard for commands so that I can walk you through the steps and you can see exactly what's going on. So for this next piece, I'm going to make an equilateral triangle. So an equilateral triangle means that all sides and angles are equal to each other. To do that, I'm just going to start dimensioning the angles. So an angle, and we'll just start with this. So I'm going to get into my dimensions command, and I'm going to start dimensioning the angles, and you'll see what an angle is. So an angle consists of two line segments. I'm going to draw an angle by itself in a minute so that you can see kind of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to left click on this left leaning piece of it, and then I'm going to left click on the right leaning piece. And then I'm just going to make sure you left click and let go. And then I'm going to drag it down, and notice how this number starts to appear. Your number is going to be different if you're drawing this alongside me because your angle has been drawn differently, because this is just kind of like a messy sketch at this point. So equilateral triangles have angles of 60 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 60 and press enter. and notice how it forces that dimension to be 60. Notice how this line curves here. So it looks kind of like an arc. An arc is part of a circle, and this is exactly what it is. So this would actually continue around and be a giant circle here. But because we only have part of this circle, that's what appears on this piece. So if you were to go the entire circle, so a circle that would be 360 degrees. So this is only part of a circle here. I'm going to go ahead and left click on the left leaning piece again, and I'm going to go ahead and left click on the base this time. And when I left click here, I'm going to go ahead and press 60. So once you have two angles dimensioned, this third one is already assumed, and I'm going to show you that it is already assumed. What I mean by assumed is there is no other mathematical way for this to make sense if this is not already 60 degrees. So I'm going to left click on the right leaning piece, and I'm going to left click on the base piece. And notice how it already shows 60 degrees right there, indicating it's already set there. If I left click, this is what's going to be, this is going to cause what's called a driven dimension. Driven dimensions aren't necessarily bad, but you have to understand that they don't set a rule in place. So driven dimensions can be changed at any time. So for instance, I'm going to create a driven dimension here. Notice how the driven dimension appears in parentheses, indicating that it is a driven dimension. So what happens is, say I left double click on the left 60 degrees here at the bottom, and I type in 70. Notice how that dimension on the driven dimension automatically changes, but this top one does not. So the driven dimension is kind of like a label, but it's not a rule set in place. So you want to try to avoid driven dimensions because you might be confused and think that I'm safe and my piece is not going to be distorted because I have this dimension on it, but that's not the case. Driven dimensions are easily distorted, as you see here. So I'm going to left click on that 70 degrees and go ahead and type in 60. You don't have to put the units, just type 60 and enter, and it's already assumed. Most time the program is already automatically in degrees. And you'll see the degree symbol here is like a little circle at the top right of each one of these dimensions. And so that tells you what the units are. So that is a unit there. It's just a symbol instead of it. You can also spell out degrees, like if you're handwriting it, but using that symbol is a really shortcut way of writing that. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's really all I want to do there. These sides are also equal. I don't know what those sides are. I'm just going to show you that they are equal. If I left click, I'm sorry, if I press my D key on my keyboard, I can get into the dimension command. I encourage you to start using the shortcuts on your computer. It's really helpful and helps you to be a more efficient designer. I'm going to left click on this right leaning piece and just drag out. And my units are in millimeters. I don't really care at this point. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Mine says 32.68. Your number is going to be different depending on how large you drew your initial triangle. And then I'm going to go and left click on my left leaning piece as well. Again, this is creating a driven dimension because we have, I think you only have to have two angles in one side to fully define a triangle. But notice how, I just want to show that, notice how each side here is equal. So as long as you have these inner degrees here set, then you'll have a fully defined triangle. So again, all you need to fully define a triangle is two angles and one side. So for instance, if I change this to 35, then all the sides are now 35 as well. That assumes that you have 60 degrees on both of these. So I'm going to draw an angle by itself and show you how we would go about dimensioning it as well. So I'm going to left click on my line command. So an angle, again, is just it's the intersecting length of two line segments in degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and get into, so I got my line command again, left click, let go, left click, let go, left click and let go. Do not left click and hold. Again, that'll put you into that arc command. And if you're fighting with an arc, you gotta learn to let go. Um, it takes practice though. So I'm going to get into my dimensions command by pressing my D key on my keyboard. I'm going to left click on that top line, left click on the bottom line, drag out. And again, I'm able to dimension this however I want. If I want a straight kind of corner, so that would be 90 degrees, we're going to talk about some basic kind of shapes as well. So if I type in 90 degrees, you'll notice how this and this. So what happens here is that at 90 degrees, these two lines are perpendicular to each other. So if you had a perfect square, for instance, those lines would all be 90 degrees. And I'm going to draw one really quick so that you can see. So I'm going to left click on my line command, and I'm just going to draw kind of a messy rectangle, and then I'm going to show you that a square has 90-degree angles. So I'm going to left click and let go, left click and let go. Oh, I don't know why my line command didn't continue. It's fine. Left click and let go. Oh, I see. I accidentally got into my rectangle command, which actually would be nice. I might introduce that right now. And then we'll get more into the rectangle command in another lesson. So I'm going to left click on my rectangle command. I can't remember if I've introduced this at an earlier one, but this would be a really nice introduction to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just left click. This is going to start the upper left corner of a rectangle. So I left click and let go, and then I drag downwards and I just go to the right and I left click, and that gives me a rectangle. If I want a square, for instance, I need to make all of these sides equal. And I'm just going to dimension it for now. There is, actually, I'm going to go ahead and use a constraint. So if I go to the top here under my constraints, I'm going to left click on the constraints command. I'm going to go down until it shows that is equal. And then notice next to my cursor, I have an equal symbol. And I'm going to left click on all of these sides here. Use my pan command to make sure I get all of those sides. And it should be a perfect square. Okay. So we have this square here, and I'm just going to look at the angle again. I'm going to get into my dimensions command. I'm going to get into my D key. Now this should create a driven dimension here, indicating that this is indeed a square. So I'm going to left click on the right piece, the right line segment of my square, and I'm going to left click on the base. And if I drag up, I'm going to create a driven dimension, and notice how this shows it's 90 degrees. So the idea in this lesson is to introduce some very simple shapes and their degrees. This is an equilateral triangle. There's other types of triangles. This is a square. All of the corners have to be 90 degrees, and all sides have to be equal in order for it to be a square by definition. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to create a hexagon, which is one of my favorite shapes. So before we start, I want to make sure that I'm in the correct units. For this one, I will use the metric system, like I promised in a previous video. I am American, and I tend to always design in inches, but I know that a lot of people like to design in other units, primarily the rest of the world outside of the US, and I think some places in Africa. Yeah, the UK also uses our system, which is where we originally got our system from. I'm going to left click on the pen and paper here. It's in millimeters. I want to be in centimeters. My brain works a lot better in centimeters than it does in millimeters. And then I'm going to press OK. You can choose whichever dimensions that you like. I know that and I always have to refer my centimeters back to inches anyways. I know that 2.54 centimeters equals 1 inch. And so that always gives me a nice frame of reference. Um, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is draw a hexagon. And we're going to just draw a really messy shape initially, and then we're going to go back and clean it up. What's really cool about using simple shapes is like you get to really know the definitions of shapes and like the angles and the links and the relationships. I really encourage you to go find your favorite shape. My favorite shape is a hexagon. I don't know why. I think it reminds me of bees, just because of the honeycomb, and bees kind of make me happy. So I'm going to left click on the line command. I'm going to left click. So here's my origin. I'm going to start just here at the top. It doesn't really matter. Your hexagon is not going to look exactly like mine, and that's okay. I'm going to left click at the top and left click at the other side of the origin, and then I'm just going to slowly go down. So a hexagon has 6 sides. Don't confuse it with an octagon, which has 8 sides. So just make sure in the end, so again, left click and let go until you have 6 sides, and make sure that the last ones are touching. So the angles of each one of these is going to be 120 degrees. So we need to get into our dimensions command. I'm going to press the D key on my keyboard. If you forget what your dimension shortcut is, you can go to create, and again, you can see under sketch dimensions how it has this capital D. Now you don't have to have a capital, you just press the D key and that will pop up. Again, L with a line command. I tend to just select the line here, but sometimes I do press the L key for that line command. So I'm going to get into my dimensions command. I'm going to left click on the top line, and then I'm going to left click on this line up here. I'm not sure what to refer to it. It's the right upper line. Okay. And I'm going to drag down. Mine's already pretty close to 120 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and left click. It gives me the option to edit. Just type in 120. Again, you don't need any units, and press enter. You also don't need that trailing 0. So you don't have to type in 120.0. Just type in 120, and that 0 will automatically show up if your significant figures are set to this. We'll talk about significant figures in another episode though. So I'm going to left click on the 2 right lines, and then I'm going to go inwards a bit and then type in 120 degrees again. And I'm going to continue going and dimensioning these interangles until it kind of gripes at me that there's too many. So 120 here, and I think we can maybe, yeah. So this one's already 120. Notice how you can't add them. If you do add them, they'll just be driven dimensions, and we really don't need those. Okay. So to fully define a hexagon, each inner angle has to be 120 degrees. Notice how things are all a bit tilted. So the other definition of a hexagon is that all the sides have to be equal. For this, I'm going to go ahead and dimension the sides. I could use my equal constraint, but then that would give it an arbitrary length, so I wouldn't know what length that was. And so I'm going to go ahead and left click on this top line here. And let me see, I'm thinking about, so these are in units of centimeters. Let's see, maybe, so this is going to be a coaster. Trying to think how big this needs to be. So I'm going to make it 10 centimeters across. We can go with that. 11 would be a biggish size coaster. We'll try 10 centimeters. Okay. And we could use the equal command after dimensioning 1, or we can go ahead and dimension the other sides, which is just what I'm going to do so you can kind of see. So this one's also 10 centimeters. Be careful. So you could accidentally dimension incorrectly. I'm going to show how you could accidentally dimension incorrectly. Notice how this line here on this dimension is a parallel. We're going to talk about parallel, and another one we've talked about perpendicular a little bit in this one. So this one here, these lines are parallel. So there's two ways I could dimension this bottom one, for instance. So if I press the dimension command, notice I can go straight to the right, and this is 7, so I could dimension it this way. But the line is not at the same angle, so they're not like leaning at the same. So this one's more at kind of like a straight piece versus leaning with it. So we always want to make sure that our dimensions are leaning with it. I'm going to drag this down a little bit and it should lean with it. So you notice how this is incorrect dimensioning. This would be correct. Okay. So be very careful about dimensioning because it can be tricky. I'm going to left click and press 10. I'm going to keep going until it gripes at me again about being driven. And that might be it right there. So I'm going to dimension this one. So this one's already 10. So in order to fully define our hexagon, it needs to be four sides need to be dimensioned and four angles need to be dimensioned. Notice how if I left click on this corner, I could physically drag this around. Again, we never want our pieces to be like free to move. I'm going to just draw construction lines to fix my piece to the origin. I'm going to left click on my line command, and then I'm going to drag along the top here until I see a triangle. So the triangle indicates the midpoint of this line here. I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to go all the way down until I find the other triangle on the other side here. It's kind of small. Pay attention for it. It's like a green triangle. Yours might show up on a different color depending on your contrast of your screen. And then I'm going to go from angle to from this left angle to this angle here. And then I'm going to right click on this line, and I'm going to do normal construction. So we've made construction lines in the past. Right click on this other line. Again, do normal construction. I know that you cannot see my drop down box. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix that issue. The recording software that I use for some reason does that. So I'm not sure what to do. So I have this little cross section here. Next, I'm going to go to create, and I'm just going to create a point. And I'm going to put a little point right where these two cross. I use points often to center things and dimension things. I think it makes a really clean looking design, and it allows you to be able to extrude things as well. So now I'm going to go up to my constraints, and I'm going to use coincident. So coincident means touching, so they're just going to be touching each other. I'm going to left click on that point I created, and I'm going to left click at the origin, and notice how my piece turns black, indicating that it is fully defined. We always want our sketches to be black before we move on. Okay, so I could draw my design here if I wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and extrude this and then draw on the surface just to show you how you can create these multiple designs. And we're going to create multiple sketches as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do finish sketch. Go ahead and get an isometric view, so that little house. I'm going to left click on isometric view so I can see my piece. I'm going to go ahead and extrude. So I'm going to left click here, left click on my extrude piece. And I want to go a distance, maybe try 0.5 centimeters. That looks a little thick. I'm going to go 0.4 centimeters. That looks a lot better. And do OK. The next thing I'm going to do is draw a sketch on this plane. So I'm going to get into my sketch command, draw on this face here. So I'm going to left click. Notice at the bottom, I don't know if it's hidden here, but it should have a sketch icon, extrude icon, and a sketch icon indicating I have a sketch, an extrusion, and then a sketch. Okay. So we should be here, and we're going to be sketching on the top of this piece. I'm going to go ahead, and this, you can be really creative here. You can create circles, you can create hexagons, you can create whatever you want. You can create triangles. I'm going to create, I think I want to create a bunch of mini hexagons. I'm going to just create my mini hexagon over here. And then I'm going to use them to, well, actually I might create my piece in here. Let's see, let me think about how I want to do this. I want to actually put it outside of here. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my line command, and I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm using my mouse, my little rolly ball on my mouse to zoom in. And this design is not going to be perfect, but I'm going to left click and just start drawing that little hexagon again. And you can zoom in so you can see your work. Again, your design can be whatever you want. I really encourage you to play around with dimensions and don't necessarily use mine. If you mess up, it's okay, right? I'm going to go ahead and get out of that line command. I'm going to get into dimension, and I'm going to dimension again at least 4 angles to be 120 degrees. So I'm left clicking on both sides of this. Okay. If I ever go too fast through a part, remember that you can pause and continue. So I would average that. Takes people that are new about an hour and a half to 2 hours just to get through one of my videos. So just know that that's normal. And then I'm going to just dimension these to maybe 1 centimeter. Trying to get, actually, I'm going to go a little smaller, maybe 0.5 centimeters. And then I'm going to go around and dimension that to 0.5 and then 0.5. Oh, I made that 5. I'm going to double click and do 0.5. Okay, so I have this nice little cute kind of hexagon. And I can move this piece wherever I want to move it to. I might move it to be a little higher. So I'm going to left click and hold on the bottom piece. I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the top. Left click and hold at the top piece. I'm going to draw a square around my piece. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to left click again. I know you can't see my drop down menu on move. And you can grab this little square here and just move freely. I'm just going to go a little bit higher with my piece and then just press OK. Okay. So the last thing I want to show you is what's called the pattern command. So if I go up here to the top, drop down, I'm going to go to rectangular pattern. And it gives me this little drop down box. I need to select my object and my directions. Okay. So I'm going to select my object, and you can go in 2 different directions. Notice how if I drag this piece, it automatically starts to go down, and I can drag this arrow and it automatically starts to go down as well. I'm just going to play around with it. I'm not going to play around with distances or anything. I'm kind of just going to eyeball this piece. I want and you can increase your quantity. So I'm going to drag my arrow all the way until like the end of this piece here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, use my pan command to kind of look around here. And I'm going to drag this arrow down to the bottom till it gets really close to the other one. Again, I don't really care. If you zoom in a little bit to your part, it'll let you zoom in a little bit more carefully. So that looks about right to me. Again, this is not going to be a perfectly designed piece. It's more like this part's more kind of artistic. And you can change the quantity. So if you go under the quantity, you can change how many. If you have a really, well, my piece went away just now. If you have a really slow computer, I don't know why my quantity, sometimes the quantity will, sometimes the computer will slow down if your quantity is pretty large. So I'm going to do that one more time because it didn't work, which is okay. So I'm going to go to rectangular pattern. I'm going to select my piece and then drag my arrows down till it kind of reaches the bottom and drag this piece over here. The main point I want to get across here is that you can create a rectangular pattern and you can draw really intricate pieces a lot quicker. So 20 is too much. I'm going to try 10. And what this does is just creates a repeating pattern of 10 pieces. And I'm going to do 10 again. So that means that we have a 10 by 10. So it's created 100 different pieces of this. If your graphics card is slower, it'll take some time to load. So just be patient with it. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. So notice how you have all these little hexagons that suddenly appeared on your piece. So now the last step I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and finish sketch. I'm going to go ahead and get an isometric view, and I'm going to, actually I want to look at this from the top, so I'm going to left click on that top plane. And now I just want to extrude all of these pieces that are actually intersecting my piece through here. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my extrude command, and I'm just going to select the pieces that are on my object. You don't want to select it, and if you accidentally select your piece and it turns blue, you can left click and unselect it. So you just want these pieces that are going to be the holes in your coaster to be selected and nothing else. Okay. And I'm actually not going to select them all. I kind of want it to be a little bit more artistic. We'll see if it turns out any. I'm just going to select a few. People ask why I have a printed coaster that only has a few. I don't know. It'll be a conversation starter. I'm going to get an isometric view, and then I can just drag down, and it'll cut through my piece. Make sure your cut selection is selected on your extrude, and then select OK. And that's it. So you have this nice piece, this nice coaster. You can smooth out the sides using a fillet command if you want, but I'm just going to leave it right here. And so yeah, that teaches you a lot of different functions in Fusion. So I hope you learned a lot of really basic commands in this one. We talked about making patterns, how to use very simple shapes and create really nice, useful things out of them. So yeah, I'm going to leave my email. It's going to be an Alias email down in the bottom. If you would like to reach out to me, you can. Again, only people that are 18 years and older can reach out to me. If you're a kid, I'm sorry, but I try to limit my my interactions with adults only. But if you have any suggestions on what you would like to see on this channel or what your child might want or need, please let me know. Or you can also message me. So either ways of communication is great. I hope you learned something. I hope you're still fighting the good fight and that you learn Fusion and that it's starting to become more fun.